Messi was at a big event to help people. Cameras were everywhere. People watched as Messi signed shirts, took pictures, and gave autographs. Everyone was happy to see him. But then Messi saw something that made him stop. In the crowd, he noticed a woman. She had gray hair and looked very tired. Her clothes were too big for her small body. She was holding a plate of food but didn't look happy. Messi looked closer. Something about her felt familiar. Then, like a strong wind, the memory hit him. It was her. For a moment, Messi couldn't hear anything. The noise around him disappeared. This woman was his teacher from long ago. The one who believed in him when no one else did. The one who told him, "You have a special talent. Never stop believing in yourself." And now she was here, sitting alone, trying to disappear. Messi started walking toward her. People were still talking to him, but he wasn't listening. He only cared about her. He stopped in front of her. His heart was beating fast. "Teacher," he said. The woman slowly lifted her head. At first she looked tired. But when she saw Messi, her eyes went wide. She took a sharp breath. "Lionel," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost shaky. She smiled, but there was something sad behind it. She fixed her hair quickly, as if trying to look better. "It's been a long time," she said. Messi sat down next to her. He didn't care that people were watching. "Teacher, what happened?" he asked. She looked down at her food. She pushed a piece of bread to the side with her fork. "Life happened, Lionel," she said quietly. Messi waited. He didn't rush her. The silence was heavy. Then, after a deep sigh, she spoke again. "My husband died a few years ago. The hospital bills took everything. Then I lost my house. I don't have kids or family to help me. So now, I'm here." Messi felt his chest tighten. She wasn't asking for help. She was just telling him what happened, like she had already given up. "Why didn't you come to me?" Messi asked. She gave him a small, sad smile. "I was your teacher, Lionel. My job was to help you, not to ask for help." Messi ran his hand over his face. He felt guilty. How did he not know about this? How could someone so important to him be living like this? "I can't let this happen," he said. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Messi said firmly. She looked at him for a moment like she wanted to say no. But then Messi saw something change in her eyes. A little spark like hope. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Somewhere I can help you." She hesitated. Messi saw how her hands held onto her clothes, like she wanted to say no. But deep down he knew she just needed a little push. So without waiting, he stood up and held out his hand. She stared at it for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and reached out. Messi held her hand tightly. This was the first step. Messi opened his car door for her. She stood still for a moment, like she wasn't sure if she should go. But then she got in. She sat quietly, hands resting in her lap. She looked like she was trying to make herself small. The car ride was quiet. Messi wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. Nothing seemed good enough. Finally, she broke the silence. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Messi asked. "You have a big life, Lionel. You're busy. You have important things to do. I'm just an old teacher." Messi gripped the steering wheel harder. "You're not just anything," he said. She let out a dry laugh, but there was no joy in it. "I wasn't your only teacher. But you were the only one who told me to never give up," Messi said. "When I thought football was too hard, you believed in me." She didn't say anything. She just looked out the window. Her eyes looked far away, lost in thought. When they got to the hotel, Messi helped her check in. She stood back, looking uncomfortable. When he got the key, he handed it to her. "This is too much, Lionel," she said. "No, it's not," Messi replied. "I don't want charity." Messi took a deep breath. "It's not charity. It's gratitude." She looked into his eyes. Messi thought she would say no again. But then a tiny smile appeared. "You were always stubborn," she said. Messi laughed. "I learned from the best." They went to the room. When Messi opened the door, she walked in slowly. She looked around like she didn't belong there. She touched the bed, then the lamp. She closed her eyes for a moment. Messi saw that she was trying not to cry. "I forgot how much I missed this," she whispered. Messi swallowed the lump in his throat. "Teacher, why didn't you come to me sooner?" She sighed and sat on the bed. "At first I thought things would get better. I believed everything would be okay. But then time passed, and I realized I was alone." Messi sat in the chair across from her. "No one helped you? No other students? No friends?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "No one knew. I hid it. Pride was my worst enemy." Silence. Messi knew it was hard for her to say all this. You'll never be alone again, he said firmly. She looked up, surprised. We'll find a solution. This isn't just a hotel room. It's the beginning. She stared at him like she was trying to believe it was real. And then she smiled. A real smile. That night, Messi left the hotel, but the heavy feeling stayed with him. He sat in the back of the car, resting his head on the window. Memories came rushing back. He was 11 years old, small, too small for the team. But he loved football. Still, life was hard. His family had trouble paying for his medical treatment. And sometimes he wanted to give up. He remembered those days when he came to school, head down. And she was always there. Do you think your size matters? Her voice echoed in his mind. She never let him quit. She always told him he had a gift. He remembered the school essays she gave him. What will you be in the future? He always wrote, a football player. And she always said, then write it as if you already are one. Messi took a deep breath. He owed her everything. And now she was in that hotel room trying to hide how much she had lost. The next morning, Messi woke up early. Before training, he made a phone call. I need to know everything, he told his manager. Why did her pension stop? What can we do? The manager wrote things down. I'll handle it, Leo. But Messi knew he had to do more. Later that day, he went back to the hotel. She was sitting on the couch holding a cup of tea. She looked a little better but still unsure. I hope you got some rest, Messi said. More than I have in years, she said with a small smile. Messi sat at the table. He put an envelope in front of her. Teacher, I made some calls. Your pension was stopped because of a mistake. I'm fixing it. Her eyes went wide with surprise. Messi parked his car in front of the hotel and took a deep breath before getting out. He had spent the whole day making phone calls and talking to people, lawyers, social workers, trying to help his teacher get her life back. But he knew that giving her money was not enough. He knocked on her door. When she opened it, she looked surprised to see him again. Another visit? She said with a small smile. You're starting to remind me of a student who missed too many classes. Messi smiled back. And what if I'm a student trying to pay back a debt? She crossed her arms. I never asked you for anything. Messi stepped inside and sat in a chair. That's why I'm here. She sighed, closed the door and sat on the bed. What are you planning now? Messi rested his elbows on his knees and thought for a moment. You said you lost everything. But I don't see someone who lost. I see someone who still has so much to give. She frowned. Lionel, I don't even have a proper home. That's why I want to help you, but not just with money. I want you to feel like you have a purpose again. She was silent. Messi continued. What if you went back to teaching? She laughed, shaking her head. I can't. Yes, you can. There are so many kids who need a teacher like you. Someone who will not just teach them school lessons but also teach them to believe in themselves. She shook her head. I'm not that teacher anymore. I'm old, I'm tired. Who would listen to me now? Messi looked straight into her eyes. I did. And look where I am now. She opened her mouth but said nothing. The room was quiet for a long time. I wouldn't even know where to start, she whispered. Messi reached into his pocket, took out an envelope and placed it on the table. I already started for you. She looked at him carefully before picking it up. Inside were documents, a contract for a teaching project, support from a foundation, and a plan to help kids from poor neighborhoods. Her eyes widened. What is this? An invitation to change lives, the way you changed mine. She held the papers in her hands, her fingers shaking. This is real. Messi smiled. You always told me never to give up on my dreams. Now I'm telling you the same thing. She took a deep breath. Messi knew this moment wasn't about papers or money. It was about giving her back her confidence. After a long silence, she looked at him. If I say yes, it will be on my terms. No treating me like charity. Messi laughed. Deal. But on one condition. She raised an eyebrow. What is it? Never say no one would listen to you. Her eyes filled with emotion. Then, for the first time since they met again, she gave him a real smile. All right, Lionel. I accept. Messi felt lighter. The first step was done. But there was still a lot more to do. A few days later, Messi parked his car in front of a big building. Today was the first day of the new teaching project. He looked at his teacher sitting in the passenger seat. She was staring at the entrance, her face hard to read. Nervous? He asked. She let out a small laugh. Do you think a bunch of kids can scare me? Messi smiled, but he noticed how tightly she was holding her purse. I know, he said. But I think... She turned to him. And what if I fail? Messi put a hand on her shoulder. You didn't fail with me. Why would you fail now? She took a deep breath. All right, let's do this. They both got out of the car and walked inside. A group of children was already sitting on chairs, waiting. There were about 20 of them, all different ages. Some were talking, while others looked at them curiously. A man came up to Messi and shook his hand. "What an honor to have you here," he said. Then he turned to the woman. "And you must be our new teacher." She hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Professor Evelyn." The man smiled. "Welcome." She looked at the children. For a moment, Messi saw a familiar light in her eyes, the same look she had years ago when she entered a classroom and said, "Today we will learn something amazing." Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped forward. The kids quieted down as they saw her standing in front of them. "Good afternoon," she said. Her voice was calm but strong. "I'm Professor Evelyn, and before we start, I want to ask something. Who here has ever thought about giving up?" A deep silence filled the room. Slowly a few hands went up. "And who has heard someone say they weren't good enough?" More hands were raised. Some kids looked down. She smiled. "Then I think we are in the right place." From the back of the room, Messi felt chills. She was the same teacher who once told him, "You can go far if you believe in yourself." Now she was saying the same thing to these kids. And Messi knew without a doubt that today, more than one life had just changed. That evening, Messi sat in his car, thinking about everything that had happened. He watched as Evelyn spoke with some of the children after class. They laughed, they listened, and they looked at her the way Messi once had, as someone who could change their lives. Evelyn had found her place again. Later, as they drove back, she turned to him and said, "Thank you, Lionel." Messi smiled. "For what? You did this yourself." She looked out the window and nodded. "Maybe. But you reminded me that I could." Messi drove through the quiet streets, feeling at peace. This wasn't just about giving back. It was about making sure that kindness never stopped. He had learned from Evelyn. Now these children would learn from her. And one day they would help someone else. It was a circle, a never-ending gift. And Messi knew that was the greatest victory of all. After class, Messi waited while Evelyn talked to some kids. When she walked to him, her face looked different. "Did you like it?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes. I needed this more than I thought." "I knew it," Messi said. She laughed. "You always know the future, huh?" The little boy who wrote in his school papers that he would be a football player really became one. Messi laughed too. "Only because I had a teacher who made me believe in it." She touched his arm to say thank you without words. "Thank you, Lionel." Messi smiled. He didn't need thanks. Now they were even. Messi looked at his phone. His lawyer was trying to fix a problem with Evelyn's retirement money. But it was hard even for him. He sighed and put the phone away. Just then he saw Evelyn walking out of the small school. She looked different. She walked lighter, her eyes looked happy. She was becoming the strong teacher he remembered. "How was today?" Messi asked. "Better than I thought," she said. "Some kids are amazing, some are a little naughty." "And me? How was I?" Before she could answer, a boy ran up to them. He was about 8 years old and held a notebook full of writing. "Teacher, look," he said excitedly. She took the notebook and read a little. Then she smiled. "This is very good, Diego. But we can make it even better. What do you think?" The boy nodded happily. "I'll fix it and bring it tomorrow," he said and ran off. Messi watched Evelyn's face. Teaching made her happy. More than any lost money. "You see? You are still making a difference," he said. She smiled. "I think so." In the car, Messi waited a little before speaking. "About your retirement, it's still not fixed. But I'm trying my best." She was quiet for a few seconds. "I knew it wouldn't be easy. But it's not fair. I worked my whole life. This shouldn't happen." She smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Life is never fair, Lionel." Messi held the steering wheel tightly. He didn't like that answer. "Then let's make it fair," he said firmly. She looked at him, surprised. "I won't stop until we fix this." She sighed, then nodded. "I believe in you. I always have." Messi understood what she meant. She believed in him when he was just a little boy with a dream. Now it was his turn to help her. Messi got out of the car and waited for Evelyn. She looked more confident now. She had been teaching here for a few weeks and she was happy again. "Ready for another day?" he asked. She fixed her bag on her shoulder and smiled. "Always." They walked to the school building. As soon as they stepped inside, kids ran to Evelyn, showing their drawings and notebooks. "Teacher, look. I finished my work," one said. She laughed and took the notebooks, checking them carefully. Messi stepped back and watched. She was where she belonged. When the kids ran off, Evelyn walked back to Messi. Did you see that? She asked. See what? Their eyes. They're excited. They want to learn. Just like I wanted when I was young. She nodded. And just like you helped me back then. They walked into the classroom. The school was growing. More and more retired teachers were joining. Volunteers were helping. People were donating money. Evelyn's story had touched many hearts. But Messi knew something was still missing. After class, Messi took Evelyn to a cafe. Teacher, I've been thinking about something, he said. She took a sip of coffee and looked at him. That sounds scary, she joked. He smiled. I want this school to grow. I don't want it to be a small project. I want it to help teachers and kids for a long time. She was quiet for a moment. And what does that have to do with me? Messi crossed his arms and leaned closer. I want you to lead it with me. She blinked, surprised. Lionel, I don't know if I can. Of course you can. Look at all you've done. She turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands. It's a big job. Yes. And who better than you? She took a deep breath, thinking. You trust me that much? Messi smiled. I always trusted you. She looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled slowly. Okay, let's do it. Messi tapped the table, happy. I knew you'd say yes. She laughed. You never give up, do you? I learned from someone who never let me give up. At that moment, Messi knew this wasn't just about helping her. It was a new beginning. Messi stepped out of his car and looked at the new school building. What started as a small idea had now become a real school. Retired teachers had found new jobs. Kids had a good place to learn. And none of this would have happened without Evelyn. When he walked inside, he heard kids laughing and playing. In the corner, Evelyn was talking to other teachers, writing in her notebook. She had that same determined look she always had. You're already the boss, huh? Messi jokes. She looked up and smiled. Someone has to keep things in order. Messi pulled up a chair and sat next to her. The project grew very fast. Faster than I thought. Evelyn closed her notebook and crossed her arms. Because it had to. People forget how important teachers are, Lionel. I thought I was alone. But when this story came out, I saw that many people were like me, left behind by the system. Messi nodded. And that's why we can't stop now. Evelyn thought for a moment. I never imagined I would get another chance. Messi smiled. Me neither. But you taught me to never give up on my dreams. Now I will make sure you don't give up on yours. She laughed and shook her head. I always knew you would go far. But only because someone believed in me first. Before he could say more, a little girl walked over with a book in her hands. Teacher, can you help me? Evelyn looked at Messi for a moment and then smiled. Of course, dear. Messi watched as she helped the little girl. At that moment, he knew his mission was complete. Professor Evelyn never needed charity, she just needed a new beginning. And now she has it. The big hall was full. Teachers, students, volunteers, and reporters sat in their seats, waiting for the event to start. Messi stood on the stage looking around. That day was special. It was the official start of the project. But for Messi, it wasn't about the cameras or the sponsors. It was about what this moment meant. He looked at the front row. Evelyn was there, sitting tall. She was no longer the sad woman he had found in the shelter. The presenter called Messi to the microphone. He took a deep breath and walked to the center of the stage. Good evening, everyone. The room became quiet. Everyone wanted to hear him speak. This project started because it was needed. But more than that, it started because I owed a debt I didn't even know I had. He looked at Evelyn. When I was a boy, someone believed in me when football seemed impossible. That person told me I had talent and that I should never give up. She made me write about my future and taught me that the words we put on paper are just as important as the ones we hold in our hearts. Evelyn lowered her head, her hands folded in her lap. Years later, life separated us. And I only found out that the person who helped me so much was struggling herself, when it was almost too late. Messi took a deep breath. Professor Evelyn, I am sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I hope this project shows you that I never forgot you. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Many people in the room wiped their eyes too. Messi kept speaking. Teachers build the future, but for some reason people forget them when they stop teaching. That must change. The whole room clapped loudly. Evelyn lifted her head and looked at Messi. Her face was full of emotion, but her eyes held something he hadn't seen in a long time, pride. The presenter came back on stage and took the microphone. To celebrate this moment, we want to give Professor Evelyn a special award for her work in changing so many children's lives, including the life of the greatest football player in the world. Everyone stood up, clapping as Evelyn was called to the stage. Messi saw her hesitate for a moment, but then she stood up and walked forward. He hugged her tightly. "You deserve this," he whispered. She smiled, her eyes wet with tears. She took the microphone and looked at the audience. "I taught Lionel Messi to never give up. And today he taught me the same thing." More claps. More emotions. Messi knew this wasn't the end of the story. But it proved one thing: when someone believes in you, that feeling never goes away. The celebration lasted late into the night. Evelyn was surrounded by old students, retired teachers, and children who were already calling her my favorite teacher. Messi watched from a distance, feeling a new kind of pride. It wasn't about football, trophies, or fame. It was about giving back. As the crowd started to leave, Evelyn sat on a bench in the corner of the hall, looking at the award she had received. Messi walked over and sat beside her. "Tired?" She laughed. "Very tired. But for the first time in a long time, I'm kind of tired." He looked at the award in her hands. "Do you like it?" She ran her fingers over the golden plaque. "This isn't about me. It's about something much bigger." Messi smiled. He understood. "You changed these kids' lives, Professor." She looked at him warmly. "You changed mine." He looked away for a moment, not sure what to say. Evelyn continued. "I thought I was forgotten, that nothing I did mattered. But today..." She took a deep breath. "Today I saw I was wrong." Messi placed his hand over hers. "You were never forgotten. And you never will be." She squeezed his hand. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was a silence of understanding, a debt repaid without words. Evelyn looked at him and smiled. "So, tell me, do you know what you will write about in your next essay about the future?" Messi laughed, remembering how many times she had made him write about his dreams. "I think I do." She smiled. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.